Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's stream. This is our first episode in a small little series that I'm hoping to make a little bit of a habit out of called Fantasy Corner. And tonight we are going to be heading on over and talking about The Revenant and the Tomb, Herman P. Hunter's debut novel. With me tonight, I've got quite the crowd. How are you doing, everybody?
Yo.
Doing good. How about you?
Oh, a little warning.
Sorry.
Well, I'm
Our
all
lodge
nice
is a
and
lot
deaf
nicer than the basement I get locked into.
tonight.
I'm enjoying this. This is pretty cozy. This wooden couch. It's a little damp, but it's better than being thrown like one clam in a cage by a mogwai.
I'm actually surprised you had a door big enough to fit a pony's head into.
You're not even in a couch. You're in a wooden chair.
With wicker bottom stripped out like in the first 007 remake.
Yeah, quit complaining. I'm lost in the hedges.
I'm not going there. Hey, look, we all bought a book.
Yeah, we
What
bought
do you
a
know?
book.
What do you know?
And
I bought this book a while back. It's one of the
yeah,
first reads I did when the Iron Age started.
If I reach into this hedge, I feel something between the twigs, and what is it? Ugh.
It's a book.
Kahuna's hat? What are you talking
well, I
about?
thought you were going to pull out a goat or something.
It's in the background.
I tried having to go here and ate all the hedges.
Now, did anybody do the audiobook in addition to the physical book? I did do both, and I've read the book and listened to it, so I'm curious if anyone else listened to it.
No, I didn't.
I
Oh.
only did
Kahuna, did you
for
bring the
this book.
screaming goat?
Ooh.
Oh, it exists. Where is it, dude? Oh my gosh, there's so
I
much.
think you might be the only one who done the audiobook.
Oh, well, I guess I'll have to have a wonderful conversation with myself about it.
Hey, you're going to give us some unique insight into the audiobook side of things.
This is for the goat, but it's not the goat. Oh.
I agree, Richard. I do question the wisdom of my actions there.
He was lost in the hedges.
Danny, where are you, Danny?
Well, anyways,
Well,
there's quite a bit to talk about with Revenant and the Tomb tonight. So
We at least know Trippy's on some leaves, so...
Yeah. Lots of leaves, lots of trees around me.
Tremendous, beautiful trees, unmatched.
so many.
So vast.
There's no trees on this banquet can, but a lovely depiction of the Rocky Mountains. No trees in sight, though.
All
Oh,
right.
yeah. Starting off with Revenant and the Tomb, I guess we'll go ahead and kind of get into some of our thoughts about it. So
Should we start with non-spoilers, or just go straight into it?
we should probably start with non-spoilers. So
Yeah.
maybe just kind of like the overall style and kind of like general things we liked or didn't like about it. I don't really have too many things to complain about myself. If we're talking on a technical level, the book is really polished.
Yeah, no, for sure. I was really impressed by the prose in particular,
And
even
I like
amongst other Iron Age aficionados.
I like actually being able to pronounce the names of these. Actually read some of the old way of speaking and not being over complicated. It's not.
Yeah.
It's fantasy, but it's not over fantasy. My dumb brain could comprehend these words.
Like, it does use some older language, but it's still
Mhm.
very accessible to someone who's done any amount of reading.
There's only one word that I do not like that was used, and it's only really used like the first half of the book, not really in the later parts.
What word?
Yeah, what word is it?
I
The
wouldn't happen to be guessing.
ERE, whatever the fuck it was, air.
Air, as in like air on the side of caution.
I remember you pointing out the word.
ERE.
I remember
ear.
you pointing out the word from before, but for the life of me, whenever I read through the book, I must have glossed right over it or something. Is it one of the earlier chapters?
It's like in the first, I want to say it's used in like the first 5 chapters in this book. It's used not constantly, but it's there. It's fine I understand what the word means but when you add in like an accent of the character during the dialogue, it breaks it a little bit.
Fantasy gasoline. That is Richard's complaints.
Oh,
Look
it
at
looks
Herman's
like RH
taking notes.
It looks like RH Snow has just joined us in the chat. Hail,
Hello,
RH Snow.
beautiful.
I think the hedge has just said to Billy, in the words of Chris Jericho, "You just made the list."
There's a list and you're on it. There's nothing you can do.
You will never, ever be the same again.
I think we're getting
I
sidetracked.
also like the length of the book. It's not too long.
No, it's perfect reading size. We are at 152 pages in total, and it reads very quickly.
I like the font size. It's like ideal.
Yes,
I do too.
It's very it's not too you're not pinching your eyes and you're not
Not
straining so
big.
much when you read. It's
Not
very
too small.
accessible the way that
That's right.
it doesn't.
I don't know why, but before I read the book, I kept hearing that it was a large font size. Looking at it myself, I'm like, not really. It's just about right.
For the size of
My
the book it
gripe
is,
is,
I definitely agree. Yeah.
My gripe is no space between some of these paragraphs. I like a little
Well, I don't even
spacing
care
out.
about that. There's a lot of decent stopping points. You know, where
Yeah,
you get
that
some
too.
of those where the
I still
font
think
is
its
so
format is pretty
small
good.
and you're afraid to stop because you're not sure you can find it again.
Chapters are broken up very well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's,
no
there's a
chapter
good flow
goes
to
on
the
for
story.
very long.
Like most chapters have a good, like the ending of a chapter is a good stopping point. Most of them, anyway.
Yeah.
At least until you get kind of towards the latter half. But we don't want to get too far into that because spoilers.
We'll probably get to a certain part of this stream and just have a big banner saying spoilers all ahead, and then we'll.
Should just have River Song come up and say it.
Yeah.
So here's one thing I do appreciate about the book. You could tell Herman is definitely a more experienced author because there's a nice balance between telling and showing in terms of what's happening in the story as well as the details of what's going on around it.
Yeah.
And honestly, I noticed a few more Lord of the Rings kind of comparisons on my second go through of this book than I did on the first one. But it's nothing so blatant. I think he really makes it everything that he portrays in the story his own. And I really
think
appreciate
it's
that.
more Norse.
Oh, there's definitely
it's
some
Norse.
of that, but there's a few things that I'm like, yeah, that's...
It isn't so
seeing
much
that.
Norse for me as it is. There's a lot of Celtic influence. I really feel a lot
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah.
That's my takeaway too. It was a lot of Celtic.
What-
To me,
what
it's
I
always
like-
felt... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
What I like is in how brief a book it was, how deep of a world he made it seem. It's like there's definitely a lot of history. The characters themselves that we get to know, it sets up that there's a lot of history and a lot of things that are tangential to the current plot. It makes you wonder about them, but it makes them feel like they've definitely lived some lives.
I will say it was around chapter 5 or chapter 6. The first few chapters, I was enjoying myself getting into, okay, we're getting ready to go on a small quest. It's going to be great. But I really was expecting this to be, okay, it's going to be an isolated, a little endeavor. But around chapter 5 and 6 is when I realized, okay, he got a full world imagined. There's more to this. These aren't just names he's throwing out. That, okay, this is a lived-in world. We're going somewhere with this.
Also,
Oh, yeah,
Herman, when you do the second and third one next year, include a world map.
Yeah, a map would be pretty cool.
It would be helpful,
there's
but
definitely
it is in the same world as
fleshed
the
out
Wizard's
world.
Stone. It's just at a different time, at different characters, different time, different
Well, that's what I
place.
was going to say.
Well,
There's a lot of
still in the
history.
world map.
It's
Well, what I
referencing
think-
a long amount of time.
What I think really helps it a lot is just the scope of the book. It isn't a very there's a lot of history implied, but the plot itself doesn't really get too out of hand. So it's like a map would have been nice, but it's not required to really enjoy this story.
I think where it needed the map the most is semi-spoiler is where you go to the gate towers, the two giant statues up until the actual area, because it kind of makes it hard to tell exactly how far of a distance that is. You know what I'm
I
talking
think they
about?
tell you it's like 2 or 3 days travel from the town to that.
Well, no, the from the statues to the tombs itself.
It does say it's something like 2 kilometers. It's something close to that, I think.
I know it
Also,
said
when I
a
mean
league
map,
in
I don't
there.
mean map particular to the story. I'm just meaning a world map in general. Include one.
Oh yeah, no. World maps they're just a lot of fun. Honestly, it's like you don't need it to enjoy a story, but it does kind of help give you a nice imagining. It's kind of like having art in your book as well. It gives you a little bit more for your imagination to chew on.
Yeah, and I completely agree. One thing that really stood out to me about the book was the element of horror that kind of gets introduced fairly early on, but it really gets expanded on about halfway through the book. For me, that was kind of my favorite part.
Oh, it felt very Robert E. Howard to me. In
Yeah,
the way that it was written, it was really that was a pleasant surprise.
especially once they start exploring the tomb. There comes a few moments where they're just investigating. It's like Hal Cedric is just kind of like searching along using kind of like his own intuition he's gathered over the course of years. For me, I was absolutely hooked, just flipping page after page when it came to that point.
Oh yeah, and that just goes to that's a compliment to the writing itself because a lot of other people could have just written it as it was, which was two or three people quietly stepping without conversation through a dark tomb, looking for things, and that could have been a very boring thing to read, but it wasn't. I was gripped the entire time.
Yeah, and that's probably how I'd describe Revenant and the Tomb overall. It's a very simple story told very well.
With decent pacing.
Yeah, the pacing is pretty strong.
It's like it's not one of those action stories that hits you and doesn't stop until the end, but it doesn't need to be. It's very they're determined people on a mission, but they're gonna have conversation, and it's gonna be broken up with good kind of environment kind of stuff and good conversations along the way.
Like I think people who do like journey in books need to look at this book and see how he does it because he handled it extremely fucking well. Traveling the chapters you travel in between and all that because it doesn't feel boring, it isn't slow. It's fun.
But Billy Bob, I think you just got called out in the chat.
Herman says in the chat, Scribbles Kahuna is the GOAT. Everything Billy Bob Sack has said about him is wrong.
However,
Herman, I went through a lot of effort to get everyone to come on here.
I want to phrase that differently, son.
I would like to address the gas can in the room, though. I'm kind
of. Are we
getting
into spoilers?
I don't think this is a spoiler, but we were talking about his descriptions, which are very good. But I was really torn on this. On one hand, I liked it. On the other hand, I didn't. I'm still not sure where I go when you use the word gasoline in a description. On one hand, it was kind of it seemed a little out of place with the rest of the story, but on the other hand, the story is being told to us, so we would describe things in manners.
I'm trying to remember where that was. Do you remember where that was?
Can you send me a picture of that? Because I don't remember him ever saying gasoline.
I don't remember that either.
I don't remember it either.
Would have been at the end?
I could think, near the end is where the one spot I could probably think
I could
definitely at the
as
end.
well.
Probably, but if he used it in like such a passing manner that my mind just
I can't remember him using it.
Now watch this be. I'm remembering something from a different book and getting mixed up.
Frequency. Where did it happen? Just give me a.
Apparently,
Richard says it's in the first chapter.
On the way out to the adventure. Okay, so it is in this book. I'm not remembering wrong. Good.
Richard says it's in the first chapter.
And here I thought I just stuck my foot in my mouth alive.
I did it on stream in front of.
Well, apparently people. Herman has heard about the gasoline reference.
But here's the thing: I'm torn on it. On one hand, the narrator is clearly telling the story to a modern audience, not in that context. But on the other hand, it's not in line with something of that setting.
Herman,
it still
was it supposed to be
all
oil
anachronism.
And you just use gasoline?
gasoline is just another word for fuel. It doesn't pull me out as much as, like, say, someone's calling a cart a car. It's a feasible word that I could see being used in that world, but I could see it. Me myself, I would prefer a better word, but yeah.
Well, I think the
But on
fact
the
that
other
only
hand-
one of us remember it tells us that it wasn't that
Yeah.
big of a deal.
Exactly.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't remember it at all.
I've.
But on the
been
other hand,
reading
what if the narrator? What if there was a book like the whole story was very fantasy, all very properly spoken, but the narrator was just as modern day as can be? The contrast
Just
would be
the hedge with
hilarious.
the camera.
Well, didn't have that Wrangler, but on one of my reading streams, I did read the chapter 1 of a book, thinking it was a Western, so reading it in a Western voice, only to discover that it was a fantasy book.
That's right.
I was
that.
watching that one too, and do you know what? Somehow it worked.
But I did it. So I'm nearly done with the first chapter. I was like,
really
pretty sure
did.
this is just a fantasy story. Damn it!
He had the
Oh,
music going in the background and everything.
I know. I committed.
But I think we're here about Revenant in the Tomb.
Herman's saying of the 39,542 words in his book, he takes more grief over 3 lousy words.
It's okay. If you didn't have any mistakes, people would say it was written by AI, and we can't have that.
But remember, I'm not saying I didn't. I'm not saying I disliked it, but I'm not saying
Whoa,
I liked
whoa,
it.
whoa.
I'm very torn on
He's
that.
already down, Wrangler. Calm down.
Do I have to?
I can't remember.
Oh no, kick him while he's down.
I almost think Herman
All
would
right.
be disappointed if we don't roast him.
Well, how?
All right,
like,
I'll go get the lawnmower then.
well, depending on what his character is today, we could just get a spick.
I'll build the campfire.
There you go. All right, sweet. So I think those are kind of as non-spoilery as we can get, and yeah. So
We could
Probably
probably
move on to
talk
the-
a little bit about the characters themselves before we get into full spoiler territory. Maybe a little bit about Drom, or how do we say her name?
Herodiani.
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 I'm saying Herodiani.
I'm just
I
calling
can't
her
say- I
Dean.
don't even know how I'm saying
For
it.
whatever reason,
Herodiani.
whenever I read the book, I pronounced it as Herodiani, and I know that's wrong, but it's what
That's missing the
sounded
D.
right to me.
Hold on, Billy. Billy, how are you pronouncing it?
I'm just calling it Herdini or whatever the fuck.
Houdini, the female version of Houdini.
oh,
Yes.
bro, I'm dying. Oh.
That's the only name that's a little bit hard for me to say.
Oh, it looks that Stormcrow has just joined us in the chat. Hail, Stormcrow.
Stormcrow.
Is it supposed to be Harold?
What's up, Crow?
Herodiani.
Herodini?
Herodiani.
Herodiani.
Trippy is not giving it very much gravitas, but he's
Herodini.
correct.
Is it Herodini?
Herodini. Okay, I see.
As spoken by the author himself. Well, as typed as by the author himself.
It wouldn't be fantasy if we didn't get one name wrong. That's just how it is.
Oh no! First time I read the book, I didn't listen to it, so I was like,
Don't start.
I couldn't figure out how to say Hellcedric in my head. It's not hard now, but
It's all centric.
Hellocentric took his random beautiful sword.
Oh, I just read The Revenuer in the Tomb. The Revenuer's chasing this moonshiner named Tomb around, and
Don't give me ideas.
Or the very popular book, The Stoned Wizard.
Yeah.
Trippy.
Like that
speaking
one.
of which, Trippy.
Trippy!
It's my favorite.
Yeah,
I
so
like the characters. There's only one moment where I really fucking I thought Hal Cedric was a dick, like unjustifiably a dick.
He seems very detached from reality.
it
But
makes
at the
sense,
same
though,
time,
with
he-
his
It
Prob-
setup.
weary of from the years, I would think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he seems to. He's been a. No, we can't. We're getting into spoilers.
He's
Well,
already.
he's
been
very
around.
stoic. He's stoic.
I think-
He's
All right,
sometimes-
guys, we're crossing the road into spoiler
Say anything.
territory. I would buy the book if I
Buy
didn't
the book.
already.
Yeah, if
Like
we're
the man
going
says,
on-
that book.
Yes,
Before
by
we-
his book.
Before we dive into spoiler territory, I guess we can go one by one and see whether we would recommend the book or not. As for myself, I would definitely recommend this book. Solidly plotted throughout. My criticisms are very minor. Honestly, I'd probably have to elaborate it a bit more in a written review. But Billy Bob Sack, what did you think? Would you recommend this book?
Well, I mean, who the fuck has been recommending this book constantly to you?
Well, true.
Yes.
The answer's
All right.
you.
All right, Wrangler, would you recommend this?
Absolutely. If you're looking for a straight up fantasy adventure, very easy read, and it's just enjoyable, and it's like it's got a lot of good stopping points for if you got to get up and go and sit if you got a crazy schedule. So yeah, this is definitely the kind of book to take along with you.
Have a good night, Richard.
Thanks for stopping
Peace out,
by.
hombre.
Have a good night.
All right,
Hopefully
King
we-
Bob.
King Bob.
Is this a yay or a nay for you?
Well, on my website, I gave it a 4.5 out of 5, or I thought I did, but apparently I mistyped it. It only says 4.3, but I will fix that.
It's a very particular number.
You give that 0.2 back right now.
It's a very important point too.
Was there an
I didn't
extra
have-
word that you didn't like?
I didn't have many complaints. I think I wrote that it said I understood why some other people complained about the book because they couldn't read it very well because of the way that the dialect was written. Even though I understand that, I didn't agree with it. I loved the way it was written.
I thought it
Wait,
was
you
very
didn't say that?
accessible. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I actually kind of enjoyed Drom's dialect a little.
I was just looking at other people's reviews and went, "Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. I just don't agree with you."
What the only other thing those people read are text messages, though. So, you know.
Yeah. How is it hard to read drum? It's just spelled accent.
There were no emojis, so they couldn't understand it.
There
Yeah.
are.
Can someone draw them a picture, please?
There are published classics written out there where, like Treasure Island, for example. I think Long
Oh,
John Silver,
yeah.
his dialogue is harder to read
That is
through than
difficult.
Drum.
Or like
100%.
every single person had to suffer through the Scarlet Letter when we were all in
Drum's-
school.
I-
That book's harder to read and it's garbage.
None
I've
of
never
Drum's
read that
dialogue was hard to read at all.
No, I mean, you could tell it was in an accent, but no, you still knew what he was saying.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I didn't agree with it. I just put it in my review because other people did.
Yeah, it's a fair
But
point to
for
bring
me, I thought the book actually started a little bit on the slow side for myself. I didn't really get invested, and it kind of like Readout was saying, I didn't really get invested until the story really jumped off at like chapter 4 or chapter 5. And then
I'll
once I
agree with
dived
that
in, I
too.
couldn't stop.
Yeah, the first couple of chapters, they're still entertaining, but it's around chapter 4 or 5 whenever they start getting close to the tomb. That's where I really start getting invested.
It's one of the things where it's like the story can't be exciting all the way through. There is an amount of necessary setup, and I think anyone who's read, especially a longer form fantasy, is pretty forgiving of that, understanding that you need to set it up for it to have any impact.
And I've read novels that have had higher ratings on Amazon that have had much worse openings and taken a lot longer to actually get going. I'm looking at a couple of novels.
That reminds me of Edgar Rice Burroughs, actually. And except not sci-fi, more fantasy. But
Yeah.
it was nice and short and to the point, just like his books were.
I just read Ramsey Lance comments.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'll meet you down at the pub.
Anyway, that's enough for me. Go ahead, Maji.
No, I couldn't say it better, dude. You're the review guy. I'm just the nerd that's here.
Maji, it's
That
your
was-
turn to.
We're all the review guys. Would you recommend the book, or is this
Speak, woman.
Is this a buy or
Dude.
a pass?
I left it in my locker at work and turned around and walked back to work to get it in the rain so I could finish. And that was not because it was due today. Does that count?
That sounds like an endorsement to me.
Yeah.
All
It's
right.
probably the best endorsement you can get.
I
Hear that,
willingly
Herman?
Your books
walked
collide
back
with the
into
rain
hell.
more than anybody else I know.
And she
I
wouldn't even do
willingly
that for her
walked back
beta,
into
Herman.
hell.
Read
Both
out.
my betas are here.
Would you? Is this a recommend or a pass?
Absolute recommendation. The only thing I can say, Some of the dialect may off-put a newcomer to reading this type of fantasy. But other than that, no, really enjoyed it. Very quick. You can read this in one afternoon. Takes a few chapters to get really going, but once it gets going, you ain't gonna put this book down. Buy the book. Buy the book.
By the book.
Buy the book.
And Trippy.
Yeah, buy the book. Those are like weird. Saying it's not accessible because I'm new to reading kind of fantasy books myself. This is totally accessible to me. Like this wasn't really overcomplicated. The language isn't that hard. I'm sure there's a lot harder stuff to read out there. I'm sure I've come across it. I know I've come across it on Comic Shop Wednesday. Like some of the fantasy names are completely absurd. I don't know why you write it so difficult. But yeah, 4 out of 5. Highly recommend. Super high recommend.
Hell,
Buy the book.
some of those Twix memes are absurd.
That's true.
Some of those names you cannot read to save your life, and other ones will get you banned if you do read them out loud.
I know. I'm illegal in 2 or 3 countries.
Are we gonna hop down that rabbit hole in this stream?
No.
Okay.
It's tempting,
Christian.
though.
It's mighty tempting, but we should probably move on before we get stuck.
All right. So, do I recommend this book? Yes. This was my favorite Iron Age book that I read last year. And that's my recommendation. As a guy who on average reads between 80 and 120 books in a year. This was my favorite Iron Age book last year. And that's all I got.
I made the mistake
exactly.
of reading
Daniel's comments. Oh my god. I am not gonna read that aloud.
It is a beautiful name.
It's very beautiful. I don't want it though.
Yeah, fine, I won't say it. It's your channel.
Is that what
Say it.
otters
Oh my
name their
God.
children? Name it after their favorite food?
Sandia.
I don't know what y'all are talking about. Chlamydia is a beautiful name for a girl.
Take
Holy
one for the
smokes.
team.
All right.
I can say it.
We are now entering spoiler territory.
Dun
Exactly.
dun dun.
Viewer discretion is advised.
Time to talk some spoilers. So, where do we want to start in more spoilery territory? I
The
guess
sword is awesome. I love
Yeah.
It is awesome.
It has
Well, the whole-
freaking holy flames coming out of its side. It's awesome.
it. And they will have holy flames coming out of their ends.
It reminded me of Sting just a little bit, where
Yeah.
whenever it approaches
Reacts to
anything
evil.
unholy, it will start warming up before just going alight. I
Actually,
really like that detail.
It
Mhm.
kind of reminded me of a silver cross in front of vampires.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that too.
I didn't really think
Also,
of Sting. I was thinking of the silver crosses that, with the vampires touch them, they burst into flames.
What
Mhm.
was Bilbo's sword called?
Sting?
Yeah.
Sting.
Sting.
Is that what it is?
Yes.
Is that
Yeah.
the name of the fucking sword?
Yes.
Yes.
That's the thing.
Well, that's
in
what Bilbo
Skyrim-
named it. I do
That's the
think it had
common
an
language,
actual
yeah.
name that was Elvish for the Goblin
yeah.
Cleaver or something
Ranger
like that.
might be right on that.
And
Actually, the
Skyrim,
Goblin
there's that-
Cleaver was the
there's that,
was
Lamdring.
Thorin's sword, but
in
yeah.
Skyrim, there's a sword, the Dawnbreaker, and that reminded me a lot of this sword reminded me a lot of the Dawnbreaker sword. This
Except
thing is
it's
definitely
not
like
an
a
evil
Draugr
goddess.
dungeon crawl.
Well, Hal Cedric had the Sword of Omens, and he summoned the Lion Thundercats.
There you go.
Well, just the idea of a sword with multicolored flames coming off of it as a reaction to evil, and I did like the specified detail that the flames they won't hurt Hal Cedric, but if anything else that they touch, they will burn, and so it's not something to be used trifle.
Lightly.
It's not. Yeah, lightly. It's a dangerous weapon.
Well,
There-
that's because Togveer tells him, "Hey, why don't you pull that fucking sword out so we can see better?"
There was one
Yeah,
minor
dude,
scene.
This isn't a toy.
There was
Yeah, he
one
wanted
minor
to use it
scene
as a
where,
flashlight.
It's like, hey, can you fire that pew pew one more time? The flash really lights up the room.
It was a reasonable question, though.
It
What were you
was.
saying, Otter?
There was one minor scene where it did confuse me a little bit until I'd read later on where he's using his sword to test how cursed the area around the
The
tomb
land.
is. Yeah, it's like he sticks it underneath a few stones and he sees that the ground around it is actually bubbling. or just kind of like going alight. He's like, yeah, this place is heavily cursed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
he
using
does
like
it
a Davy
because-
lamp in the coal mines.
Because Togveer specifically mentions, hey, there's like no green grass or fucking trees like 30 feet away from either of these statues.
Yeah,
Well,
everything,
blood and
like, there's
all.
nothing alive until you get to the trees, and the side facing the statues is also dying.
Yeah, and the when he cuts his hand and puts his blood on the ground, it starts fucking bubbling and shit.
But his blood makes evil bubble. He got bitten in the tomb, and the monster that bit him nearly freaking disintegrated just from his blood.
Well, yeah, that's a very common kind of thing to happen for this archetype of character. The holy war or the warrior blessed by God. That character is always.
So this brings us into some speculation, though, because I wonder
That's true.
what happened to him.
Yes,
We're not
Revenant's
given
been
the answer
alive
in the
for a
book,
long
but it's got to be fun to think about. Clearly, just based on what he's called, the Revenant, he was died and either resuscitated or resurrected for purpose.
Well, he straight up
He's been
says he
at
was
it for a long
resurrected.
time.
Yeah.
Well,
And there's a reference to the Prophet Wars and everything, so something went down in the past.
Yeah,
I wonder.
He defeated a fucking witch god bitch.
Priestess?
The prophetess?
his
Yeah.
friends and shit that turned and he
Wow,
was like, oh, yeah, I
what a
killed them
way
all.
of words, Billy. Which
But-
god?
Right.
You should write.
But I wonder, how long has he been at it? How weary is his spirit from watching his friends grow old and die?
I don't think he's weary. I think he's just becoming jaded a little bit. I think he's done this
Well,
for so long.
Yeah, but I mean, you would have to become callous if you live that long because
we're far
you
past-
lose people.
Well,
We're far
it-
past the point of him being like weary. I think he's just come to almost accept it at this point. He's in the acceptance mode.
Yeah. I
It's
get
also
that too.
kind of told to you by how Cedric, it's around like the 80% mark in the book that despite how messed up everything that's going on is, this is the second worst situation he's dealt with. There was one like hundreds of years that went on
when he was
beforehand.
genuinely young. Yeah.
Yeah, it was with the
Otter.
prophetess.
Yeah, but that's like when he died.
Right.
He's talking about like talking about the last time he truly felt fucking fear. Like was genuinely.
Yeah, that's right.
terrified.
That's right.
I will. Oh yeah, Herman did mention in the comments the multicolor flames were put in because of the artist wanted to use that for the cover, and had a knack with color, and then he backed out of doing that because it was too hard, and Herman left it in the book.
I like how his cover turned out, though.
Yeah,
It's very clean. I do like it, but I do, in my own mind's eye, I do like the multicolored flames better.
The nice thing
like
is,
to see it.
even though it's not a scene directly from the book, it's got enough to tie into the book that you feel like it is.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you get those most random
Hold up,
covers
Maji.
that you're like,
You mean the cover fucking relates to stuff in the story?
yeah, exactly.
What a
It's kind of
concept.
weird.
Oh,
What?
Well, no, wait. We can do that.
We could do that.
You know, you could just borrow ideas and items from the book, and if you put them on the cover, it might do you some good. It really ties it all together.
It's like you're trying to get somebody to buy the book.
I never would have thought of that before.
You should have
You
done that
know,
for your book.
You
Otter.
guys make fun
I
of
know,
that,
right?
but so many covers don't do that.
Mainstream,
Yeah,
it's
Maji,
getting
that's why-
worse. It's really bad.
They're more like those.
Making fun of it.
They're more like those
I'll
perfume
make fun of
commercials.
that
They
later.
show a commercial, then they're selling a perfume. It's like, what did the imagery have to do with what you're selling me?
Mhm.
Nothing.
did you ever see like the '80s rock one where he's like the animated one where he's like I think it's a cologne or some shit, whatever the fuck deodorant. It's like this '80s fucking dude pulling a sword out and all kinds of shit, lightning in the storm.
It's not ringing a bell. I'm surprised I hadn't seen something like that.
Okay, so what I liked was actually the very opening scene, because it actually what it did. Very first thing you do when it introduces you to the two main characters. Well, I guess the guide's not really a main character, Drom. Kind of
Well,
is.
Yeah.
he is
Cedric
the
is kinda-
second
He is.
POV in the story.
Yeah.
Tertiary.
But it gives you a shot to see their actual personalities right up front. Usually when you go through this long intro and stuff, you don't really you see the world more than you see them. No, Herman's intro puts you right dead center, and Drom's like, "You're a moron."
Drum is so
like-
skeptical about Hell Cedric.
Yep.
I also
And
like
how
that
Cedric's just
this is-
all business, unflappable.
Mm.
I like that this is also a story that starts out in a tavern. It's one of the most used starts for a lot of fantasy stories, but in this case, it works really well.
I
Hold
think
up,
it does
Otter.
too.
Otter.
It's using a trope to really good effect.
It also realizes consequences of showing fucking bags of gold in this seedy ass
Right.
tavern.
Yeah,
He didn't even
And-
show a bag
I
of
love
gold.
that.
He showed a single gold.
The book. I was really worried when the first time I read this book. I'm going through, and I'm like, Hell Cedric's he's acting a little dumb, and then he gets hurt really badly in the fight. I'm like, that wound would f you up unless there's something really good to qualify how this story moves forward. I'm done. And then he heals. I'm like, oh, okay, well, there we go.
I like
There's a
that
good
it's not-
qualifier.
I like that it's not Wolverine healing either.
It's
there
not.
is actual
It took him
consequences
a
to it.
night of resting to actually. What was the wound almost completely gone, but not quite the next morning, I think.
I
Next
would,
day or so, yeah, it was.
I
It was
would
like
say I would-
the red mark of irritation was there, but it wasn't even a scab.
I would like to have him to put a little bit to what the limitation of this healing. Like if he gets his fucking legs cut off, are they growing back? Or is
Right?
I've still
Iris.
read a couple of stories that have had kind of like similar powers where
I'm
I'm
gonna say
left
no.
wondering more like where's the limit here. This it's still, even though it doesn't explain everything, you still get the idea that if an arm gets lopped off, he's seriously in trouble. Unless I'm just thinking wrong.
No, you're right on the money. It's not like you mentioned earlier. It's not Wolverine healing. A wound, like even a wound that's not like mortal from a normal person. If it happens right before, like say a fight, that's still bad news for him.
Right.
Well, I mean, after the first confrontation, this part I liked about him. He's actually going, man, that was a stupid move. Like he was sitting there criticizing himself because he knew better. And he knew he was pushing himself to the limits.
Or is this Highlander rules and you have to get your head cut off to die? I'm all for Highlander rules, by the way, in this. I'm all for it.
In this
It's supposed to
story,
be
I think it
immortal.
would be appropriate. I don't know what the limits are. I do think he's
Yeah.
blessed by God, obviously, and I'm curious what his relationship with the elves. I'm curious as to like the kind of relationships between nations and such in the larger overall world at this point.
Well,
in the
the elves
timeline.
don't even let men into their thing, so I think that gives a pretty good idea.
I still
They're
get
kinda
the impression that
I don't think
if
it was men. I think it was people that were mortal.
I
Yeah,
still get the impression that if
Yeah,
Hall
man.
Cedric was bled out, he would die. Like
I
most
think he
certainly.
would. Yeah,
Yeah, but
Yeah.
would he be resurrected again? I mean, the whole idea is the Revenant. You know what Revenant means, right?
Right.
So
It's
he's been
also how it
resurrected
works in
once.
this
I
world.
He'd
don't
just
know
be
if that means
resurrected
that he
again. I
is
know, would it be
blessed until the
again?
end of time, or if
again,
he is.
like how many
But
times?
Christian, he has had like serious wounds constantly over the fucking 100 years because he's like pretty much he's like, oh yeah, this one would fuck up anyone else, but to him it's just kind of a nuisance at this point with pain.
Yeah, I do think it would have to be a very severe wound to possibly kill him. But we don't really know what his limit is. But the fear that he feels does make me feel that it's not that there is definitely he is still vulnerable to death, the way that he fears it. At least in the, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
RH
talk
Snow in
about-
the chat is saying that Herman makes maps and a world guide.
Ooh, really?
No, I
Does
think
it- yeah,
Also,
I
she's
think-
apologizing because she got a
World
phone call and had to leave. That's so.
I think she's saying that Herman needs to
Yeah,
make
she's
maps
saying
in the
make
world guide.
maps.
Okay, maybe I read that
Put
wrong.
that in the book. Put it in the book. You're scribbling notes down, Herman. Put it in the book.
Herman says, "Buy the book," and we say, "Put a map in."
I like
Put it in
maps.
part 2, part 3.
And a pronunciation guide.
Also, how did we feel about our two companions of Hell Cedric? We have our not dwarf Tolvgear.
He reminds
I
me
like
of
They're definitely
12 gear
supposed
was
to be like
fun.
the dwarf.
Tolvgear reminds me of the guy from excuse me, Firefly. What was his name? Shane, like the other kind of shady.
Oh yeah, I can
Jane?
see that.
Jane.
Yeah,
How could you forget
totally
Jane?
reminded me of that character.
Yeah, I can.
But,
A little
but,
less-
But 12 gear had more.
Humanity.
Had a little more of a moral compass than Jane.
Yeah, Jane is a little more out for himself. Tolvgear, he's over the top, but he still cares about people.
Mhm.
He's got that Jane-like attitude, but a
Tough
very
guy.
different.
Tolkier's like
mhm.
the perfect cross between
Morality.
Jane and Gimli.
Actually,
Hey,
you're right.
Yeah,
That's
that's
a
good.
really good
Yeah,
description
Maji,
for
you're
it,
right on
actually.
with it. The
Aren't they
hero
supposed
of
to be like
Kensington.
5'6", by the way?
I thought he was supposed to be
Tolkier's
bigger.
not like actual fantasy dwarf size. He's actually
No,
like,
he is smaller, but not that much smaller. Also, he has one of the best lines in the entire book. What was it? It was right
Right,
when
my
he was standing
from
atop the
Tolkien.
ledge and calling out a challenge, basically saying he'd take them all on. I'm trying to remember where it was.
what was the one where he said he was talking, I think, the House Cedric in there, like the elf chick, her. What did he say the fuck it was?
They're Alani.
No, her. How did you tell us that she's supposed to be saying it?
Billy Bob, just say Hermione because it makes me laugh.
It's
Yeah,
her.
Hergini.
It's
You're-
Herodini or Herodini.
I think it might be this
Her-
one. Tolvgear protested, yet one remains. You will deny me this small pleasure. Like when he was gonna
That's
take
a
off
great
his,
line. It's not the one I was thinking of. It's a
No.
great line.
Yeah, he
He's
has
a
a
lot of
bunch
good
of great
lines.
ones. He has
I think
great
Drum
ones.
has a lot of great lines in the book.
12 gear was the only one who got Hal Cedric to crack a joke, though.
That's true. That's true. oh yeah, the joke came out of freaking nowhere for me too, because Hell Cedric is so stoic as a character. It kind of catches you
but
off guard.
he would only get like that with 12 gear.
So what did you guys think about the tomb itself? Because probably my favorite moment in the book is whenever they're inspecting like the piles of dead corpses, and Hal Cedric is like, I'm going to try and make an incision here. It's very likely that they will get up. Be prepared to run.
I
We
actually,
just told him that fair
Oh.
run.
Let the woman talk.
sorry.
I slapped the woman.
Go ahead, Maji.
Yeah, it's okay.
I agree, RH Snow. The tomb is a character.
It is.
Yeah. From the moment that they discover the bones and the kind of corpses, it's tense from then until the beginning of the fight.
Oh yeah,
I
seeing
actually-
corpses in a tomb is like Chekhov's gun. You know something's going wrong, especially after he stabs it and they don't respond. It's like, okay, now I'm even more terrified.
Yep, this is bad.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Sorry.
On my first read, I was wondering when he was going to have them wake up and chase them. I was like, all right, when's it going to happen? Is it going to happen when they turn around or some shit? You know?
I like how slowly it happens. It wasn't like this zombie thing right away.
It wasn't a jump scare. It was more of kind of like that creeping psychological terror. It's like, you know it's going to happen, but when?
It's
When
like
is it
there's
going to
something
happen?
in the darkness, but you can't see it. But you think there's something there. It's
And
very
what
scary.
kind of added to that was the fact that the whole enemy faction, for lack of better words, there with the Raven Wizard and the zombie bodies and everything else they had to fight were never truly defined exactly what is this group, what are they after. That the way they were defined, you could see what they are but not what they're about, made it even
If
a
you've
little more
read
anxiety inducing, so to speak.
If you've read The Wizard's Stone, there is a small connection between these and some of the things you see in that book.
Oh.
But yeah, no, the very demonic forces kind of stuff going on. It's,
Yeah,
So-
but they were described just enough, but not too much, to where they could still be anything coming at them.
yeah. I have a very definite kind of image in my head, but it wasn't too specific. It was just enough to ignite the imagination.
Yeah, honestly, it was the walking corpses that creeped me out a lot more than the disciples that were supposed to be crows. Don't get me wrong, it was some really cool imagery, but it was those few moments where Hall Cedric had to stop and just listen, and he's waiting for something to happen, and he's like, all right, let's keep going. Then
All right,
right as the... Go ahead.
Can I ask y'all a question?
No.
Does this sound? Is this a mistake or is it just me? When he's talking about the wizard dude that the fucking shot with the bow and arrow, when they go and inspect him, he says clad foot to toe in black.
No,
I think he's
that's
supposed to
just
say
he's
head to
wearing
toe.
But
all
he's-
black.
Yeah,
He's
what
completely
would
covered.
be wrong with that statement, Billy?
Foot to toe.
Foot to toe.
Yeah, foot to toe.
I missed that.
Oh,
Not
okay.
head to toe. It doesn't say that.
Was it supposed to be head?
Yeah.
Head to
Like I
toe.
said, there's very few mistakes in this book. That's just one of them I noticed.
One
in this book.
If we're diving
contrast.
into that minor of details for stuff to criticize, I think we can come to the conclusion that the book is pretty solid all the way around.
Well, like hell, even
yeah,
even someone
well
like
polished.
Sanderson had found a mistake in one of his books. It was like, I took out the word backpedaling there during the sword fight because they don't have bicycles, and that's where it comes from. And I'm like, that is such a minor. To call it a mistake is the most nitpicky of nitpicks.
And keep in
I
mind,
didn't say it was like the biggest world-ending fucking
Yeah.
thing. I'm just saying.
Billy Bob hated the book, Herman. I'm sorry to say.
Can't
Better
tell.
luck next time, Herman.
keep in mind, no matter how many editors a book goes through, you're still gonna find a typo somewhere. Something always slips through.
And a lot of the biggest books, like in mainstream publishing, have had major typos here and there. Like anyone read an original copy of Jurassic Park? Holy crap, that book had a lot of typos.
But if we can keep them to a minimum, but remember, we in indie we tend to be under a little more of a microscope for that stuff.
Well,
Hell,
remember, we read
just
the
kinda
Hunger
stupid.
Games first book that has fucking issues all up the ass in that book. And that was a major book.
We talked about a lot of things in that book. World building was the best thing in that book, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
hell,
read out
even if
paper.
we're talking typos, I think I found more typos in some of Robert E. Howard's stories than I found any of them here.
Yeah, it's a very clean read. I was never pulled out at any point.
Yeah.
Did you guys?
Whimsyland has the answer.
Oh, brilliant.
What you're asking, Maji?
Did you guys notice the contrast in the actual tomb itself? So normally, holy relics, angelics, all those guys are the immortals. But in this story, they were the dead ones, and the undead were the ones that he sliced and were still bleeding. They weren't, red blood, but they still had some sort of blood coming out of the back
An
of the leg.
ichor of
Black
sorts.
Black, yeah.
So he created a parallel contrast where the holy ones sacrificed and the undead, the evil, were still alive, which kind of creates this undertone for not just the tomb but the entire world here.
Herman?
Because
Yeah, I got a question for Herman, if he's listening. Did he take the armor with him? Or do y'all remember if he actually takes the armor?
Yeah, no, they take the armor and the bones. Yeah.
So he's going to be wearing it.
No, not
No.
necessarily.
That's what I was going to ask. Like the whole point, it didn't really say what his mission was. Like, did it ever say specifically what they were there to do? They were there to get the
there to check to see if the original, like
The wards.
evil dude in the tomb and his generals. That's why they were going through it, and they were like, "Oh, the first fucking ward is broken. The second one's fucking broken. The third one." They're like, "Oh,
Well, how does
it's out."
he didn't say how he knew this. It seems like he knew there was going to be cults coming in there. They clearly had an alkalite coming in to do stuff there, and then they had to remove the armor and the bones. The Lord of Bones, was it?
Well, it was
And-
No,
specifically
but the bones were
original-
from another, like basically a wizard who had made the ward and stayed on the inside because
Well,
you
it was-
couldn't set the ward on the inside and then
was
He was
escape.
trying to get his soul to rest. He was trying to give him a proper burial. That's why
Well,
he took
because
the
it was
bones with him.
specifically one of his comrades from, like, one of the people he knew served as comrades that sacrificed themselves to seal in because they needed a ward inside and a ward outside.
Yeah, but they didn't know, they weren't going there for that. They just wanted to. They had heard rumors and they wanted to investigate, make sure that everything was still kosher, with that no evil had escaped when it shouldn't have.
Well, they
But-
did get sent there by someone because they were wanting to directly report it back like they were supposed to. They
Yeah.
were just going to check on it because they heard cultists talk about, in cities and shit, that there was the old Revenant tomb where it's located and stuff.
And then
Not
there's
the
a big
weapon.
baddie at the end. You come across what's his Astaroth. Apparently, he's supposed to be the big evil force that's driving all this. I don't know. It seemed weird that.
Well,
had that
the
little
language that
interaction.
was used there was very. I thought it was very clever. It was like the power behind it was not as strong as when he had encountered it before, but it was it was the same flavor. It was the same smell.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah,
a piece of cloth ripped off. I thought that was great. Kind
Yeah,
of
it
language
wasn't-
used there.
There,
It wasn't the same he faced before. It was just he knew it. He knew it.
It was of the same ilk.
I do have one minor criticism. The moment where he does face Astaroth, and you think there's going to be at least a bit of a confrontation, but he kind of just disperses or flies through him and goes away. It was just a smidge anticlimactic, but that is very much a nitpick on my part.
Yeah, they just finished a giant battle, so I was
Yeah,
curious. Like, are you gonna fight this big boss now after that whole?
I
epic
kind of,
fight?
yeah. After the fight, it could have happened, and I would have been happy with it. But I do think he wanted to set up a further story by releasing
Right.
him.
I kind of wish there was just a teensy bit more. Not much at all, in fact.
Yeah, I kind of wanted a little bit more in the traveling. I felt there was too uneventful. It was like 2 chapters went by where they kept moving on, and it was uneventful both times. It's like, it could have
I'm
made something
sorry. I
happen,
love
but
the journey because
Yeah.
they're having talking and discussions and stuff, which I enjoy.
Well,
Yeah.
it really
Dram
comes
and
down to
Hell's
Yeah.
reader style a little bit. Some people like kind of languid. Some people like hearing all the details about the world and the conversations on the campfires on the way on the journey, and other people want to kind of just all right, cool,
Action.
they're traveling, get over it.
The conversations between
Bandits.
Dram and Hell Cedric, that's kind of the cornerstone of this book. That's how it world builds the most. Their campfire conversations, the conversations in the tavern, on their journey and before the final battle, really exploring the various philosophical beliefs that are in this world. We get an idea of what is commonplace and then what is, I guess you want to say, is supernatural in this world between the two of them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Strangely
and-
enough, Drum was had the most character growth out of all of them.
And it makes sense. He was the one who, like everyone else in the party, so to say, had already they were who they were. They knew their mission. It wasn't a mission of it wasn't a situation of self-discovery. They already knew who they were,
You could
and it was
probably-
Drom who was having
was a
his
straight-up
ideals kind
adventure.
of challenged.
You
So
could
yeah,
probably criticize that Drom isn't with them when they're inside the actual tomb and learning what's going on. I feel like if he was there with them, it probably would have added a little more to his character, but I don't know. Even that.
But he
isn't
was heavily
too
involved
much.
in the final battles.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was.
I
so he
think
kind of
he had
makes
seen
it up.
enough.
But I thought it was kind of weird to end on him though. Like, what became of Dram? I'm like, okay, and knowing that he changed his faith because of what he witnessed. I mean, I get it, but it just seemed like that statement's definitely way past the time of the events that we just read.
it is, but it's because we will not be revisiting him. His story is
probably
done.
not. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's whenever the specifics of the story are starting to unravel, so it's starting to stretch out longer and longer in time to kind of set up the next story with them. So it's like Drom is pretty well out of the picture, but it's still going to track Hal Cedric, Herodine, and why am I forgetting his name? Tolvgir.
Yeah.
Actually, it is possible we might one day see Drum again in a later book in the Land of the Elves, because that would still be consistent. Nobody else knows what happened to him, but if he was there all this time, it wouldn't break any continuity.
As a cameo, I would respect it. I wouldn't want him to become a
No,
leading
I
character.
wouldn't
No,
want
just
him
like
to
running
become
to
a
him.
main character. It would be cool to see him show up at the end. Hey, remember this guy? That would be kind of cool.
It would be
Someone's
neat.
side
It would
like
be
a
neat.
wife or something.
He married a hot elf chick.
That was hilarious.
So how do you guys feel about the way they depict not dwarves and then elves in this world?
I mean, I think it's fine. It did kind of confuse me a little with 12 Gear. I was trying to put a mental picture around him. I got a little bit of something, and then I went, "Oh yeah, he's kind of a dwarf in a lot of ways. Not exactly Gimli, but not too far off either. He's kind of like Maji said. He's kind of a mix between Jane and Gimli. That's the
In
best
my
way you
head,
can kinda
I just
picture him.
envisioned him like a dwarf, straight up. I have to admit, the whole time I didn't think of him as anything other than a dwarf, just with a
Oh
different
my
name.
god, he was, really.
I pictured
tiny
him as just a
with big
short
giant
king. Short kings.
lamp. Wrangler
What are you
pictured
saying,
him as
man?
like 4
Saying.
foot tall.
I pictured
No,
him at like 5 foot,
yeah.
lower end 5 foot.
I pictured him at like 5'6".
I also like
Because he's
Is that a
actually
dwarf Billy
taller
Bob to
than
you?
the elf chick. I think he's actually
my
taller
God.
than the elf chick.
Herman just says short king in the chat.
I have no plans to write about Drum again. In your face, I was right.
I also like the contrast in age in this book. The younger a character looks, usually they're longer lived than the others.
Yeah.
Like Herodine is the oldest out of all of them, and
She looks
Drom,
like she's the fair maiden, so to say.
yeah, and Drom is pretty well the youngest one, even though he's an old man.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's supposed to look like 15 or 16, isn't she?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Because it's like he said, like
A young
like 3
girl.
or 4.
I can't remember. Did they say how long they live?
Child.
It's implied that like she's old, but it's implied that they can live for at least several hundred years. Yeah. At least some of them
I thought
can.
they lived forever.
Yeah,
Because, the whole point was.
No,
that
I think
she
it is
doesn't-
implied that they eventually
They do
age to some
perish,
degree. Yeah,
but it's
but
eventual. It's a very long.
they're on a whole other plane of existence compared to the rest of the world.
But the reason why I'm saying that is because when specifically it's pointed out that she hasn't seen much death, like real death. Her people don't really experience it that much in their life.
Well, it's given the impression that they're a rather isolated people. Like Drom doesn't know much about them, and he has a lot of it explained to him / us, the audience.
And
Yeah.
Herman just clarified. He said they're called ageless for a reason.
Well, the fair folk, I got that. I'm on the page right now. Lonnie, the fair folk, the ageless. That's the other word he uses.
Well, I
Fair
kind
folk.
of get.
Well, are they genuine? Like, can they? So they don't die of old age, or is it just that they always look young and they live for a long time? That's the question.
Sprat Herman.
He's right down there. I'm waiting for my answer, boy.
I'm getting the
No.
impression they'll, if nothing makes them sick or cuts them down, they'll go on living forever. That's the impression I'm getting.
Yeah.
I kind of get the idea. They're not 1-to-1, but at least age-wise, they kind of remind me of Tolkien elves in that way, where they're either immortal or extremely long-lived compared to the other
Anybody
races.
else want the horses?
Weird. The girl with a pony in her profile picture wants to talk about the horses.
Oh, what is soccer?
Well, but these horses act pretty much like freaking sheepdogs.
So yeah, Herman is saying the Alani embody the notion of living in perpetual grace. They do not get sick and they do not age, just like Tolkien's elves.
Okay, so they are truly ageless.
Yeah.
See, Snow
I was
likes
right,
a horse.
Christian.
Billy Bob Bet second, suck it.
As long
Anyway,
as I
Stop
get the
playing,
horse.
okay?
what?
What?
She's like, they can suck whatever they want. I just want the horse.
I'm not.
Oh no,
gonna-
the horses were cool because it kind of makes sense. Like even in Lord of the Rings, it's like the elves are very cool, but they have nice horses, but that's it. That it's just like they're just nice horses. These they feel like truly like almost a different species altogether.
Well, Herman, I hope you don't make your elves douchebags because I fucking hate Tolkien's elves.
I get the impression that they're very, very different. Like, obviously, they live so long, and nothing was normal about the way that she acted. She felt
No,
almost
we get
alien.
to like eventually like a final conflict, and the elves like peace out of their own.
Well,
like, they
Now, what are
didn't
you talking
ultimately-
about? You
She
know
has some
that she
nice
played light
ninja
as a
skills,
feather
though.
and stiff as a board when she was in her adolescence.
well,
on,
what I
what'd you say,
liked
Rico?
about I liked
Ashkan
about
Witch
Herodiny-
Author.
What I liked about Herodiny, though, is it's kind of setting up the stakes by also explaining who she is and what the Alani are. Because once they're actually starting to encounter both the disciples of Ashtoreth as well as the tomb, it's actually kind of narrating how she's making the odd mistake where she shouldn't have.
Oh, okay. That's the one moment where I thought Hal Cedric was a dick. When he was like, "Oh, make sure you shoot true," and it's like the moment before they're like, "Oh yeah, it was probably fucking magic why you missed."
I did like how much emphasis was put on that point. Like she misses, and they look at her like she just sprouted wings and flew.
Well, it was
like her-
later
her
on when
response.
they even discussed that it was that wizard dude was probably the Raven, and that's why she missed because it was magic. You know.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
100%.
thought he was
yeah.
kind of
He
pulling
turned
her
at
away.
a highly unnatural angle, and that's how she missed. So it's
Maji,
kind of
I would-
implied that it's magic.
Yeah, I would say that unless he says, "Oh, I don't give a fuck about how my tone and people perceive my stuff," and I was like, "All right, dickhead."
Yeah.
Well, she
But
does. She
every
does give
other
him. She
fight
does
she
give
was in,
him.
though.
What was that, Wrangler?
Every other fight she's been in, though, she just like was. She was like just perfect. Like every shot
Sniper.
hits. I mean, she's like, yeah, she was like went full ninja.
It's interesting that I get the impression that elves are not as good in close combat as, say, like traditional like Lord of the Rings elves. Like she doesn't seem like she's stronger than most people, just that she's very skilled. That's the impression I got. Anyway.
No. She'd have to be stronger because he specifically points out that her bow is almost as big as her, or taller as her. She's able to pull it.
Well, that's true.
Gotta
That's
have
true.
some, you
But
know.
they also specify that it's not a bow strong enough to send an arrow through mail. So
But she's not superhuman, though. I don't.
yeah,
think.
yeah.
I do like how Herman stayed true that the arrows were specifically for her bow. It kind of drives me nuts when you see some of because if you've shot a bow, a lot of your arrows are designed specifically for that type weight and all that in the bow. So if you try to shoot a foreign arrow and it's not close to a match, it won't work.
They will if you force it, Maji.
Not as good as you hope.
You can put a 50 caliber in a shotgun of the right size. Just because it fits doesn't mean it works, but you know.
But I did like that attention to detail. Unless you shot a bow, a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah,
I got a video for you, Kahuna, where they did actually shoot a 50 cal through a shotgun.
I
and it worked
knew
fine.
it. Oh, that's fantastic. And no, Ashkan Child, what do you think this video is? We all agreed to read a book, and now we're talking about it. This is a book, basically a book club.
Yeah, we gave our impressions, and now we're going fully through spoilers.
We're going Kahuna deep into this story.
I think we officially hit the nerd portion where we talk about which is better.
That's true. That's true. So here's something. It's been talk. I've seen other kind of videos done like this. What are your guys' hopes for the future of the story? Like any sequels that he may come up with.
Well, there's definitely gonna be another one. Well, on top of Herman has told us he's already got the next one written.
Yeah, it's part
the
one
way
and part two next year. I think May or March. I forgot which one he said is when part one will come out.
The way
just
he
said
ends
that
it.
2 books right there.
Yeah, he did say it earlier.
Well,
Herodine
yeah, but
has some badassery in the next 2 books.
Well, the biggest thing for me is I want to see more of the world. I would like to see more of how Cedric, Tulfgear, and Herodine, but it doesn't even have to be them. It's like what the mysteries that's kind of set up through this book. I want to learn more about like the different corners of the world in the later books. It feels like there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, I'm
also-
there with you, Otter.
Agreed.
Factions. There's no factions. It doesn't tell you too much about the kings and all the stuff
Well,
like that.
it
the
just
wars
kind
are
of
going
gives
on.
you
It
read his other
references
book
it,
to
but-
learn a little bit more about that. Obviously, it's
Oh,
at a
okay.
slightly different time.
Yeah.
But
Oh, look
But
what Herman
that's
just
enough-
posted in the chat.
May 21st, 2024.
Ooh.
The first book. The sequel to Revenant and the Tomb.
RH Snow is just saying, I want Hal Cedric to go full Conan on the baddies. Yeah, me too.
But here's the thing: the way he has it set up, he could go either in the past or the future, and adds to the book perfectly well.
Yep.
That's what I was curious about. Like, is the next one going to be continuing, or are we like going to go to that one coastal
The
city that
Prophet
they're headed
Wars
for?
or something. Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
he's
we're gonna go
talked
back
about
there.
he had written a story for Hal Cedric before, and it was
I want to
a
know what these
different
Prophet
one.
Wars are. That's where I want to. And the cults. Like, what is this cult? Like, who are the bad guys? What is this like cult?
Didn't he say
after-
that Hal Cedric is like the prototype
He's just
for another
evil.
character as well, or was a prototype for another?
He has said that in the past. Yeah, I'm wanting to know the purpose of his. Like, you could guess, but I want to know the purpose of his resurrection, and if he has a specific purpose or something kind of a blanket mission.
I also don't understand why he's not interested in learning the words on his surcoat.
Yeah, I got that.
I don't know if
confused,
he's not
too.
interested. Did he say he's
That-
not interested?
Yeah,
or-
he said he
Yeah.
doesn't care about.
That is,
Yeah,
I,
it really
I
doesn't
thought
matter.
that was weird too. But
Maybe it's like
Herman said the King and the Wizard Stone has 2 books already written about him, so he's going to
Yep.
be dropping some installments over the next year.
Well, he's
Dude.
also saying he intends to resurrect Hal Cedric's origin story.
Yeah, that's a story he's written before. I'm curious. He
I'm nice
had
to
written
this
it and then he
point.
dropped it. I'm not entirely sure why, but yeah.
It's a good pun. Keep the pun.
The tremendous pun. Big, beautiful puns.
Maybe he wanted more mystery later on down the line instead of, like if
Well-
you knew Hal Cedric's entire backstory.
I don't think you
before
want to
getting
start your
to
story if you want to usually start in the middle of your character's adventures. You know, you don't start at the origin. He's already had his.
Well, it's
Adventures
a very
and his
older
establishment.
style writing thing too.
I really like that. I don't need to
Herman
know
said he
his.
dropped it because the middle
origin, I just-
sucked.
Yeah, that's what
Give
it
hints to
was.
Now I really want to see it because I want to see what it's like when the hedge is absolutely terrible. When the hedge is really thorny.
Well, it's kind of like an older fantasy thing too. Because if anyone has read the Elric novels by
Yeah,
Michael
I
Moore?
have.
No.
If you read them in order of publication, it's nowhere near chronological order.
No, isn't it that Stormbringer is one of the earlier novellas that he ends up publishing? I believe that's right.
Well, yeah, like Fortress of the Pearl chronologically takes place fairly early in the stories, but it was like his 4th or 5th book that he released, and so
Yeah, and Stormbringer is, without saying much, it's
Boomer
basically the
fantasy.
apocalypse. So,
yeah.
and that's I think it was probably like the 3rd or 4th book he made for Elric. It wasn't that far in, and a lot
And-
of what he's done since has been filling out the timeline between his origin and the eventual end.
Well, that's the thing with his multiverse. It's great, but anyway, we're talking about Herman's book.
Yeah. We're getting off topic.
So, Herman, here's a nerdy question, not at all related to what we were just talking about. Would Hal Cedric possibly, in this reality, be the eternal champion of this reality?
You know, that
It's
is a
his
very
world's version of
interesting
Link.
question.
Good question.
Well,
Herman's saying, I'm also seriously considering writing another Hal Cedric-like character.
like Ho Cedric,
It
who is a flaming mace and is not at all the same character. No.
Oh no! What about Pal Cedric?
Oh yeah. Well, who can forget him? Yeah.
What about
He
a
also
female-
had a flaming weapon. It was just a short sword, so it's different.
What about a female variant, Gal Cedric?
Gal.
Oh god.
And his hacker, eccentric.
Don't remember, Gal Cedric is better at everything than Hal Cedric, even fighting.
And she's an asshole to everyone and gets away with it too.
Gal Cedric got more maidens pregnant than Hal Cedric. I'll tell you that.
Well, hold on. Was Gal Cedric one of Jennifer Lawrence's incarnations?
Yeah, the first female actress.
She was the first female actress to get resurrected on top of being the first female actress.
First
She was the
female,
first
say less.
Ever female.
Oh, yeah.
The first female god. Jesus.
What has happened?
Oh, my God.
I think we can wrap it.
Yeah, we can probably go ahead and wrap this up.
This is well beyond delusion.
Was there anything else we wanted to say about the book before we wrapped up the stream?
Ratings.
No, nothing.
No.
I like the
Christian-
theme of it all.
Christian started off then.
Okay. I do out of 10 with 5 being true average. I would give this a 9.4. Like I said, it was my favorite Iron Age book I read last year.
Nice.
Trippy.
Yeah, I agree. Like 9 out of 10. Like this is really good. I think Faceless was the first book I read, and then I went on to Revenant and the Tomb, and I was just blown away by introduction to Iron Age author. I'm like, this is fantastic stuff.
Especially from one to the other too. The jumping.
Because I didn't know what I was getting into, and this is like one of the things that Herman kind of established. Like, no, the authors that are going to be joining this community and be part of the Iron Age are going to be legit.
Yeah, 100%.
Read out.
Well, I am going to give it 4 Buy My Books out of 5. And with that, I do have to abruptly depart. I do apologize. I have to take charge with some chauffeur business for family. So this was a great book to read. I don't normally read. Wow, that sounds horrible.
I don't normally read.
I read, but I gravitate toward nonfiction, and I can go. Reading fiction can be like molasses. So take it if I say that somebody who struggles reading fiction, went through this within an afternoon, just started reading a few pages, all this good, and then boom, I've reached the end. I think it speaks for itself how good this is, and I'm looking forward to more of the adventures of Hale Cedric and his heroes, his friend of heroes. Yes,
guys, listen to him. He reads.
I do read. I do read. There's a whole library of
library
papers.
Library?
Yeah, libraries of papers relating to
I read
officers of
history.
the 18th century. I read. It's probably not very entertaining.
Non-fiction.
Yeah, non.
I read for the pictures. Hardly ever look at the articles.
Be very, very quiet. I'm weeding.
Well, he reads the stuff that can't be written. It's all history.
I'm gonna go weed Playboy.
Can't write that stuff.
All right, now I'm off to read historical Playboy, I guess. All right, have a good night, everybody.
Good night, read out.
Oh, I'm dying here.
Good night.
Maji-chan.
I don't think I want to follow that.
Are you sure?
I guess better to follow it than be in front of me.
Is that a threat?
Yeah.
But anyway, so you know what's interesting about this? I blame Billy Bob Sack because I got into reading this because I was trying to do research for my own novel, and after reading Herman's shit, I realized there is no hope for mine. But but it is actually really good.
What's your rating?
Out of ponies. How many ponies?
How many hedges?
Ratings.
How
many
many
hedges
friendships?
out of 5?
How many friendships are magic out of 10?
Why do you know that?
I have children, Billy Bob Sack. Why do you know it?
Watch
I
My
thought it was
Little
because you were
Pony,
her
they're
beta.
2 boys.
Okay, so I'll give it 8 out of 10 ponies.
All
Ooh,
right,
nice.
King Bob or Gino.
Well,
Or
like
just
I
Bob.
said before, it's on my website. 4.5 out of 5. It's got my review written and everything, so you can check that out if you want. It's already written for you.
And what do you call that website, Mr. Bob?
The 4ffoundation.com.
Hell yeah.
Nice. Frequency.
I give it 8 hedges out of 10. Immerse yourself in the hedge. Go check out this book. It's a lot of fun. I'm waiting for the next one to come out because these characters, they're definitely their own flavor, but you get hooked on them and you're going to want to know more about them. And Norman, I'm looking forward to the next one.
Nice. All right, I guess me. I give it 8 pairs of athletic tits out of 10.
Did
Fucking
we
buy
skip
the
Trippy?
book, assholes, if you haven't.
That's a lot of tits.
Yes.
That is a lot of tits.
We
Otter.
skipped Trippy.
No, we didn't.
No, we
No,
didn't.
we did.
No, we didn't.
No, we didn't. So for me, I'm gonna rate it on pure enjoyment scale. If we're talking polish alone, just on a technical level, I'd probably give it a 9 or 10 out of 10. But if we're going purely on enjoyment, I'd give it an 8 out of 10. So well above average. 10 out of 10 is like a handful of books, like absolute best books I've read.
Yeah,
8 out of
very-
10 means it's very solid. Very, very solid.
For me to go any higher of a score, it would have to be like one of my favorite books of all time.
Yeah.
And I do really enjoy it. It's just not. It takes time, even for my favorites, to get up that high on the list. So give
You
it
have to,
time.
like-
We'll see.
You have to blow my mind in order to get like a 10 rating out of me, and you're talking to me, so
Yeah.
my mind's been blown many times. I
For
don't know if
me-
you can blow it anymore.
For
Wait,
me, even a 9 is mind blowing. That's
Yeah,
kind of how
it's
I see
rare.
it.
yeah.
Once again, I was willing to walk back into hell in the rain to get the book that I left in my locker.
And
That
she
says a lot.
didn't even do that for her betas. Think
Who-
of that, people.
Who
Think
who knew that who knew that hell was blue? Anyway,
Anyways, that seems like the perfect chance for us to go ahead and end the stream. Well, thank you everyone in the chat for joining along with us on this whole review, this whole discussion. And with that, we'll go ahead and say adieu and God bless.
Hey, Nate, buy the book.
God bless.
Like he said, a Jew, God bless.
And Happy New Year.
Books.
Oh yeah, Happy New Year.
Happy
Happy
New
New
Year!
I'm gonna lean this back.
Woo!